Hey guys, so today we are going to work on creating a custom curtain panel, and we're going to use painter's tarp, which I've already washed and dried. And sometimes you have to wash it a couple of times. It gets a little kind of rigid and funky, so just kind of keep that in mind. The type of painter's tarp I'm using is basically the one that's reusable. It's the one that's intended for painters to kind of just use again and again. You just throw it into the wash and dryer, okay? Be really careful because some of them are not quite as sturdy. This almost feels like a really heavyweight linen. So we're gonna use that. And measurements. That's almost like 2 yards, okay? So if you're kind of wondering how long is this one, 36 times 36, so 72. And then I go with the longest length because if I'm hanging it from a curtain panel or a rod, I want it to have a little bit of a billowy shape to it. And I'll show you a little trick that I'm going to use here at my house to show a bit more height when you're actually putting your curtains up, if that makes sense. All right, so let's jump to the pattern and the design I'm going to use. This is called Long Wall Panel. It's a stencil by WoodUBend. And what's really cool about it is it's a really long stencil that I can kind of just roll out and just do in sections. So I can kind of decide how wide I want this to be. Be really careful when you first open it. There's a little like hook that kind of holds it all together. And then carefully just go ahead and let it unwind, and we'll tape it down with a bit of painter's tape, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and get this all unwound. And when you're storing it again, make sure that you keep the tissue inside of it. So don't get rid of your tissue, because that way it'll protect all the fiddly little ornate pieces from getting mangled again. Okay, so don't chuck this, just kind of set it aside. And if you're wondering what kind of a work surface I'm on, I basically just go get my husband's workhorses. They're the little A-frames. And so I've got 2 underneath, a massive piece of wood that I use for crafting on a regular basis. And I have a horrible back, so I'm always kind of thinking about that, so I have enough room for my chair if I have to sit down, okay? So the side of the curtain you want to stencil on is the one that does not have the seam exposed. So make sure that that's in the back, okay? And I'm just gonna start off with the center seam on this. That's gonna be my, kind of my go-to guide in terms of like, where do I start? So I'll just make sure that that's all laid out. Once I've determined that this is pretty centered, I'll go ahead and lay out my stencil design. And I'm gonna hug this on either side of my center seam. Then I'm not having to worry about, is this good? Is this centered? It's on the center seam of the fabric. Somebody did the work for you. Don't overthink it. And you can do one of 2 things. You can either put like a heavy rock on each corner of your stencil, or you can simply tape it down. And then I've already taken the liberty of mixing up my yellow paint. So this is going to coordinate with my pillows that I had posted in a couple of YouTubes back. It is gac900, which is a golden product. It's meant to be a fabric medium, mixed with my chalk paint of choice. I just happen to be using Debi's DIY. And this one is Queen Bee. So I mixed up a huge batch of this before, and I didn't get a chance to use all of it at the same time, so I put some saran wrap on it and stuck it in the fridge. So it's kind of helpful if you don't get around to using a whole bunch of pre-mixed paint, okay? Pour a little of it onto a flat surface. I have my little foam roller here. And I'm just loading it up. I do not want this to be like sopping wet. In fact, if it doesn't get like full coverage and like every intricate part of this stencil isn't shown or doesn't have the exact same opacity, like it's not consistent, I'm okay with that because I like imperfections. I almost want this to look like it's been a little bit worn and it's been through the wash a bunch of times and it's just a wonderful old tapestry. And then kind of just push down really hard so any of the juice that's essentially soaked into the foam roller, you're getting out. Okay, when it's done, I can decide if I'm going to reposition the stencil in another area, how far apart I want to go. I don't want it to be like all over the curtain because I kind of like there to be some of the natural color coming through too. So I'm going to play with this a bit. But I'm also going to shift my panel so that I can finish it off at the bottom. And that's, again, one of the reasons why it's so darn handy to work off of the center seam of your curtain. Line it up so that your stencil seams line up, and then just continue rolling. So the cool thing too about this mixture is because it's not like soupy moisture, and I haven't dried this, like there's no dry time in between. It's going to absorb pretty quickly and it's not gonna seep through the backside. This is super thick, okay? And look how pretty that is all the way down. That is the cool part about having the long wall panel, is you could use a portion of that on a pillow, you could use that on a big piece of wood that you're hanging on the wall, you could use it on furniture. Don't think small. Like your wood panel or your long panel stencil can use you like a million different projects, you know what I mean? So I'm just gonna go ahead and continue stenciling. I think I'm gonna do this a total of 4 times, and then I'm going to heat set it with my iron, and then I'm going to go ahead and wash and dry it again. So about midway, my back started getting a little bit cranky. And so like I said, you just kind of shift and do things that you have to do to sort of make things work. And sometimes sitting as opposed to leaning over is easier. So just pay attention to your body too. I mean, I recognize, you know, we all want to be creative, but sometimes we have limitations on space or physical limitations, like I said, in my situation. So I always have to be really, really careful about my back. Otherwise I'm wrecked for a few days. And then I can't get any crafting done. Can't have that. But I do find that if I am seated, I can more easily kind of brace the section I'm working on between my two fingers, and I'm kind of just pulling out and making the stencil a little more taut. So you just get a little more painty, a little more messy, but it's actually not too bad. Okay. I can get some of this goop off my fingers. It also helps to lay the stencil out so it doesn't curl up on itself again. Because I do have another panel to do. And you don't have to do this all in one sitting. You know what I mean? Like I said, you can stash your paint with some saran wrap on top in the fridge and save it so you're not wasting it. All right, so there we go. We have a gorgeous little panel down the center, two actually in the center, and then one on the outside. So you'll get peekaboos of that, because you got to keep in mind when I'm hanging this, I'm going to use the curtain clips. This gives me the opportunity to fold and kind of hide or show, because some of the curtain panels I've seen in some of the farmhouse magazines show the excess hanging over as a little flap, but you can hide it behind, which is lovely, and then just kind of tack it on. And then if you at any point ever decide to increase or shorten the actual height of your curtain rod, you have the fabric to do that with. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry. Depending on how crazy you are, and I recognize that we're all kind of crazy, you could throw this in your dryer and you could heat set it in your dryer. So if you let this air dry, you could throw this in the dryer and let it heat set in the dryer fully. And that's assuming that you want to wash and dry your curtains. And I, for one, I get tons of dust on my curtains, so I have to wash them a few times a year. So being able to wash and dry these is wonderful. So ultimately what I do, and this is again something you have to kind of keep in mind. Do you want to accidentally get paint on the drum of your dryer? No? Okay, then use an iron. Just throw a little towel on top of all of the areas that you had paint. Just do a few seconds of basically heat setting this on, and then you're good to go. It just depends on your preference. I'm gonna go ahead and pause the video, do what I said I was gonna do, and then we're gonna go hang up the curtains, okay? One more thing I wanted to kind of bring to your attention is I'm not only going to raise the rod, I'm going to take the rod a little closer to the wall in the upper right corner. And by doing that, I can actually utilize this space for my extra curtain, because if you think about it, you're gonna be coming and going out of the door. The last thing you want is to have like this big bunch of curtain kind of hanging around. So I'm gonna push it over just a little bit so that you can actually use this. The other cool thing about that is it's hiding all of like your switch hardware, you know? And it's just one of those things that it's kind of nice to be able to hide, because you know, we don't want to look at all the hardware. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that before the rod goes up. Okay, so we have the panels up right now. Now the one thing I will say is this, the little trick I was talking about with the curtain rod. By making this higher up on the wall, it changes your eye and brings it up higher, and it actually allows you to have more of the panel visible. Plus it's just aesthetically more pleasing from an interior decorating standpoint. And you're like, I don't interior decorate, but most of us want to have a really pretty home, and these little tricks make all the difference. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and take the actual rod itself, move it up so it's just below the ceiling line, and then we'll be able to hike these up. And this is why I was saying sometimes it's worth it to keep the extra fabric and not cut it. So I have all of that extra fabric, which would be billowing at the bottom, and I do like a little billow because it's kind of bougie, right? But this way you can actually have far more of the panel visible, which is ridiculously cool. So we're gonna go ahead and change the rod, and then I will take a picture again to show you kind of the difference between the two. Okay, so we're back. The curtains were raised a pretty significant amount. I would say at least 5, possibly 6 inches. And just that 6 inches made a world of difference. Your eye is automatically drawn up and to the height of the curtain, which looks just totally awesome. And as you can see, these kind of have like a wonderfully worn kind of European sense to them. So it's not like you're gonna go wrong if any of the stenciling is imperfect. In fact, I think it just makes it look better. So there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed your bougie on a budget curtain panels, and I hope to see you guys back again soon. Bye.